Hello, welcome to a new episode of Talk Turkey.
Hi from Brussels, Nation.
Let's start with the photograph of this week, or even this month, maybe. This is quite historical. This is the photograph. Mr. Erdogan, the president of Erdogan, is shaking, the president of Turkey is shaking hands with the president of Egypt, El-Sisi, and they're in Qatar. You can see the Qatari Sheikh Al-Tamim just behind them. Well, this is historic because this is the first time Mr. Erdogan shook hands with El-Sisi. So, well, we're going to have to go back a little bit past in time. Turkey was quite involved or interested in the Arab Spring, especially in Egypt. After the uprisings in Egypt, Tahrir Square uprisings, the only organized political construct or political organization was actually the Ikhwan, Muslim Brotherhood. So after the turmoil, Ikhwan had managed to basically show itself as the only credible political organization that could govern Egypt. Then the elections happened, and the candidate that was supported by Ikhwan, Morsi, was elected. Morsi was under the radar of Turkey back then, the Turkish government. They had really close ties with Morsi, that we have this semi-governmental think tank, SETA. The members of SETA were like frequently in Egypt. They were advising Mr. Morsi, and there was really close contact. Back then, Turkey had this foreign policy idea, being involved in the Middle East through Ikhwan. Ikhwan, well, rather than, what was before Ikhwan? A Ba'ath. So the Ikhwan presented itself as in a sense, maybe you're going to elaborate more on that, Murat, as an alternative to Ba'ath political parties, more of in a sense, pluralist Islamist organizations. So also Turkey had high hopes for several strong Ikhwan governments in the region. However, in Egypt, the government has proven to be wrong in their calculations, because after a short period, Ikhwan governing the Egypt, some turmoil started. People again started going into the streets because they found the Ikhwan governance problematic. They were not happy, and then the Egyptian army stepped in. Turkey was also very interested in this period because I think AK Party government has seen some parallels with the Egyptian government themselves, because they were some sort of sponsoring Morsi government, watching them closely, building ties, whatnot. And also, remembering the Turkey's past with a lot of coups d'etats, military coups d'etats. AK Party, when they were rising the power, they always used this anti-coup d'etat narrative. So they saw some parallels. So they were really involved in the process, and they stood against the coup d'etat in Egypt. Well, initially, everybody was against the coup d'etat, obviously, even the United States. But however, it's proven that there were no other alternatives within Egypt, and the coup succeeded, and there was no public backlash against the coup, and El-Sisi legitimized himself. Turkey was not that eager or fast, basically, to mend ties with Egypt and the El-Sisi government, or government, whatever you call it, the coup d'etat government. So Turkey was stubborn. Mr. Erdogan never wanted to shake hands with El-Sisi, and actually back in 2011, there was this UN General Assembly, and during the meetings, there was a dinner thrown for world leaders. Erdogan refused to join this dinner because he did not want to see El-Sisi, God forbid, sit in the same table with them. So basically, from that position, rejecting Sisi, fundamentally, and not talking to him, taking the Egyptian cause like their cause. Now we've moved to this, Erdogan shaking hands with El-Sisi during Qatar World Cup football tournament.
And we used to have also this Rabia symbol, which became also AKP's even political symbol. What happened to it? Is it still there? We won't see it again?
Yes, so actually, this Rabia is like it means four in Arabic. So Muslim Brotherhood supporters, they were gathering in this Rabia square in Egypt, resisting the coup, like some of them, and they were dispersed eventually by the army. And even there was a young girl whose father was an Ikhwan supporter. She was killed by the military, so she became like a symbol. And obviously Erdogan has like owned the cause, and he said Rabia is now our symbol also. Like he was doing this, he was greeting people like that basically. When he was leaving Turkey, he was doing this. When he was doing rallies, he was doing this.
Yeah,
And
there were
actually,
even some monuments, right? With that, like
there
with
were monuments. There was a monument in Düzce, somewhat close to Istanbul, like huge monument of Rabia. Apparently, they removed it really quietly in 2019, though. But when they were being erected, it was a big deal. But they were being removed. Everybody was silent. So Erdogan kind of Turkicized this Rabia. He said then he kind of he found the Turkish meaning to that, like one nation, one state, one language, one something. I mean, I
right,
forgot.
I guess.
But yeah, so that was it. And now, of course, this Rabia is, I think, gone. I mean, I don't think we'll see Erdogan again doing this. Actually, he had a little small Rabia monument on his table, back in Beştepe in Palace. I doubt we're going to see that again.
Interesting. Well, I mean, the speed of change in Turkish foreign policy is almost paralyzing, actually. I mean, if we try to explain this probably with like international relations theories, it's unimaginable and we cannot really explain it. Just like AKP's so-called unorthodox economic policy, probably we can also talk about an unorthodox foreign policy here. From enemies to friends with the speed of light. We can talk about Saudi Arabia, Israel, UAE, now Sisi, and Syria's Assad is loading. So to be honest, calling this a grand strategy, as some of the pro-government journalists claim, is an insult to the term grand strategy. It is certainly a pragmatic policy. Does it bring short-term benefits to a certain extent? Yes, it does. However, it's very problematic for mid and long-term image of the country. It has consequences for the perception regarding the credibility and reliability of the country as well. Basically, mistakes were done in the past, and you don't need to like leaders of certain countries. And actually, many leaders in Turkey's region are very unlikable in any case, such as Sisi. I mean, who would really like Sisi? That's clear. However, a country like Turkey doesn't have a luxury to cut ties with many countries in its region, especially if Turkey wants to play that leading regional role. So cutting ties with Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, it was a bad idea in terms of diplomacy. And using ideological reasons for this was even a bigger mistake. And this has created a lot of damage that we cannot reverse, unfortunately. It even changed the dynamics in the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey even caused the emergence of some very unlikely alliances between Greece and some of these countries. And maybe we can very briefly talk about two main reasons of this change in the foreign policy now. The first reason, yes, there are mistakes in the past, and those mistakes created a lot of trouble for Turkey in terms of foreign policy, security, economy. And AKP has realized that things cannot continue like this. And that's correct. It's probably too little, too late, and a serious damage is already there. But still, it's a step in the right direction. I mean, Turkey should be talking to these countries. Turkey should normalize relations with such countries because we cannot afford in Turkey to have no diplomatic ties with the countries in the region. But then there is also a second and even more important reason for the government. Rather than this so-called grand strategy, the name of the game is winning the next elections or survival strategy. So it's no secret that there are major economic issues and the government needs to finance its so-called unorthodox economic policy until the elections. They need to show some short-term limited success. That's the entire logic behind this strategy, especially behind the rapprochement with countries like Saudi Arabia, for example. So Turkey is expecting investments from such countries like Saudi or UAE. Turkey expecting to improve economic relations, trade relations with all these countries, and even swap agreements in order to improve foreign policy reserves, at least on paper. There are many main dynamics, in this relations, and we cannot really talk about a very long-term strategy or very long-term dynamics, but everything is more about how to survive until elections and how to make sure that the AKP can be re-elected. And if you really want to call something to this new diplomacy, you used the term actually a few days ago, and I liked it because we have seen football diplomacy, we have seen cultural diplomacy, gastro diplomacy, but in the history of diplomacy, probably the first time we are seeing mango diplomacy. You were talking about this 2 days ago, I think, and maybe you can tell us why are we talking about mango diplomacy, and you can also further elaborate on this changing dynamics.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Well, we have one of these government pundits, Abdulkadir Selvi. He's like a columnist for Hurriyet newspaper. And basically, when you follow him, when you read him, you get news from the government side. I mean, some people tell him what to write, basically. I mean, those types. He's not a bad person or anything, but he kind of believes in this cause, whatever the cause is of the government. He loves Erdogan, whatnot. So he
and
wrote.
We like reading him. It's interesting to follow the dynamics.
Yeah, exactly. It's always interesting. So he claims Mr. Erdogan has been serving mango juice to people who were visiting him in his palace. They were asking, what is this mango juice? Where is this coming from? And they claim Sisi wanted to make men's with Erdogan. He wanted to start relations. So he was sending with some people to the palace some mango juice. That sounds, kind of a little unrealistic, but who knows? So they are trying to say through Abdulkadir Selvi, it's like, because they have to tell this to their voters, right? To hardcore AK Party supporters, because they build all this narrative, all this anti-Sisi, anti-Egypt, anti-Greece, anti-Israel, anti-everybody narrative. They have been writing on this narrative for the last 10 years. They built a whole foreign policy on that. So, okay, I understand they will make a U-turn, and they can make a U-turn, no problem. Sometimes they're ideological, but their ideology is also it has its stretches. So anyways, but they have to tell this to their voters, to their constituents. So they find excuses like, well, they approached us. They wanted to talk to us. They changed their perspective. They changed their policies, not us. So they found Sisi, wanted to better the relations, so he sent mango juice. And also, Abdulkadir Selvi, again, the pundit guy, he introduced this grand strategy. He wrote, this is called, so Turkey is shifting its foreign policy, and it is called the grand strategy, basically. So we learned through him that this is called, I don't understand what sort of grand strategy is that, but you mentioned, Turkish central bank has zero, even minus American US dollars. They need US dollars to keep Turkish economy afloat. So basically, they run around, keep asking for money. They mend relations with Saudi crown king bin Salman, and we just received the news that Saudi Arabia is going to send Turkey some swaps of $5 billion, right? So they need money. They need to keep the economy afloat. That's one part, and also practically, Turkey has its own, in a sense, theory of Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey wants its share of the gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. But how are you going to do that? You have to talk to other cities surrounding the Mediterranean. You cannot just send around ships and pretending like you're going to attack these countries like tomorrow. You cannot do that. You have to sit and talk to Greece and Egypt and Lebanon, and Israel, or whomever, if you want to find a solution. And if you want your share in the Eastern Mediterranean, you're going to have to sit and talk to these people, start diplomatic relations. There are also other realities Turkey is facing right now. They're kind of calling it grand strategy. I call it, facing the facts. I don't know. What's your take?
Well, probably good morning after supper strategy as well.
as they
But
say.
well, it's a bit too late, though. I mean, in Eastern Mediterranean, as you said, that's a very strategic region for Turkey, and with all these energy projects, potential energy resources as well. And that's exactly the reason. I mean, probably if Turkey had normal relations with Israel and Egypt, at least in the region, all these sort of anti-Turkey arrangements in the region would have never been possible. Because, I mean, traditionally, Greece, they don't even have good ties with any of these countries. So it was a bit like Turkey pushing these countries to Greece so that they can sort of create this holy alliance against Turkey in the region, which didn't work very well, but which worked as good as isolating Turkey in the region. So, and you're right. I mean, Turkey had to react, and reaching out to these countries and normalizing ties was the best approach. In that sense, I mean, I'm not criticizing that this is happening. I'm just criticizing that this should have happened a long time ago. So
Yeah.
that's the problem. And probably we will also see continuation of this in the coming weeks and coming months. As I mentioned, the next can be the rapprochement with Assad. It's also incredible, but it's true, because there's been also like this discourse against Assad, and Turkish government was publicly talking about getting rid of Assad. So, and now we are coming to a position that President Erdogan has already made it clear that he's open to a meeting with Assad. And there are rumors that Putin will facilitate it and bring two leaders together as part of an international gathering. So it shouldn't be a surprise to see it in the coming weeks or months. And parallel to this, so on the one hand, we talk about all these rapprochement strategies, but then parallel to this, we can also see increasing tensions, especially two fronts. First of all, not surprisingly, between Greece and Turkey, because there are also ideal conditions for this. There are elections in Turkey, there are elections in Greece in 2023. Both governments may see escalation of tension as a political opportunity ahead of elections. This has always been the case, and unfortunately, it is also used equally by the Greek side as well, especially right-wing governments. They like to escalate tensions with Turkey as well. And then the second is Turkish military operations to northern Syria against PYD. There are already airstrikes, but it's likely that this will turn into a ground operation as well. So airstrikes didn't really create a major reaction from the US and the West in general. And AKP seems to have managed this in a way so far. However, the ground operation and the extent of it will be important, of course. Such an operation is also important for the upcoming elections, some sort of message to more nationalist voters as well. So close dialogue with Russia, and the fact that Russia's attention is elsewhere at the moment, it is also used, I think, quite effectively by Turkey so far. But still, such a ground operation will still require a balancing act between Russia, US, between West, other actors. So far, I think Turkey played a sort of neutral position between Russia and the West very well. But there are limits of this. Turkey is probably one of the very few countries profiting from the ongoing crisis. And sustaining this, at least until elections, is probably the goal of the government. Maybe this works so far, but it's impossible to sustain this for a long time. It's also creating issues for Turkey's credibility in the West, in NATO. The West has already accepted the fact that Turkey is not joining the sanctions against Russia at the moment. But I don't know to what extent the West can really tolerate very long time that Turkey benefits from these sanctions. And Russia is using or trying to use this as an access to international markets. So pressure on Turkey will probably be growing, and we'll see if AKP will be able to resist until elections. So this entire foreign policy, both with rapprochements, with tensions, and with balancing acts, it's all about preparations to upcoming elections, indeed. But I don't know, could this really work?
That is true. Well, I mean, it might, in a sense. Well, the elections, I mean, the electorate, especially AK Party electorate, they are mostly concerned about the economy. I mean, the foreign policy, this and that, all this balancing. Is Turkey approaching NATO, or is Turkey, approaching Shanghai organization, whatnot? This is more of rather, like intellectuals are into this discussion, not the simple man on the street, like in many countries, I guess. So what's really concerning people is the economy, and Erdogan knows that. So he has to basically keep economy working. Right now, Turkey is high inflation, but not recession. The growth rate is not that bad, but we are receiving signs of recession. For example, we are seeing the industry started to use less energy, which means the production is slowing down. And also this could lead to more unemployment. This is something that Erdogan would not want. So he needs immediately money, investment. He needs the backing of the West, because Turkey does most trade with the West and everything. He doesn't want to lose Russia at the same time. So he's just juggling a lot of balls in his two hands. But he instinctively knows that he needs money, and he needs to better the economy and show his people that his theory, which is unorthodox, or whatever, economy theory, is actually working, and he's going to make Turkey a better, more prosperous place. So he's working for this. Yes, as you said, for the elections. But by the way, probably I need to also state that actually the opposition kind of applauded when Erdogan met with Sisi. I mean, rather than applauded, they said, well, we should have done this much more earlier. All this isolationist foreign policy hurt Turkish interests, both in Turkish foreign policy and Turkish economy. This was the position of the opposition. So even if there's a governmental change, probably if the opposition takes the power, they're going to be even more eager to talk to Assad, Sisi, Israel, whatnot. They're going to want to turn to old ways, old classical Turkish foreign policy in the region. That's what we know. And also, you mentioned Sisi. Yeah, I'll just remind this photograph. This is right before the Arab Spring, when Assad came to Turkey and Erdogan greeted him, called him a brother, whatnot. Yes, Erdogan wants to meet with Sisi. He said that, actually. He said it quite a few times. But according to Syrian press, Assad is not that eager. Russia is trying to find a middle way, according to reports. Turkish press says Putin can arrange a meeting in Moscow, like an international meeting, and both Assad and Erdogan can be there, and they can meet there in that meeting. But according to Syrian press, Assad has his conditions. First of all, he wants Turkish army to back off, basically. He doesn't want Turkish army in Syria. This is his first condition, according to Syrian press. But you know what? We'll see. I mean, Assad does not seem eager, because this is like the fifth time, even maybe Erdogan is saying this. He started saying this in a more subtle way. Now, last two times, he said directly, yeah, why not? We can meet with Assad, in foreign policy. There are no eternal enemies. Things change. Yes, we can meet. He wants to meet, definitely. And also one reason he wants to meet with Assad, because now there is this anti-immigrant sentiment in Turkish public. And you see in the polls, like constituents, Turkish voters say they think there are a lot of refugees, a lot of Syrians in Turkey, and they want them returning to Syria. Turkish people think, well, the war is over and we hosted them for this many years in Turkey, and now economy is in dire situation and everything, so we don't want Syrians anymore. We want them back. We want to see them going back to their country. That is also a strong sentiment within the AK Party constituents. And also, I think this is also one of the number one things in his agenda. He thinks if he can talk to Assad, find a common ground, maybe he can make this process faster and start sending some Syrians back. Also, this is one of his calculations. But if this is realistic, I do not know, because Assad strikes me as one of these autocrats who hold grudges. I think he's less pragmatic than Erdogan. But we'll see.
But also the opposition's stand and discourse is also influencing this, I believe, because the opposition has started this discourse that following the elections, when we come to power, we will go and meet everyone, including Assad, and find a way so that we can solve at least a part of the refugee issue. And only then the government started to also approach this issue in this way. So we still talk about like all this AKP strategies, but actually what opposition says or what opposition promises nowadays, it's also pushing AKP, both, I mean, in foreign policy, but regularly also in domestic politics as well, to certain direction as well. That's also why I still believe that the opposition has a good chance, actually, if they play this game well, if they continue to play this game well. And despite the issues, united opposition and uniting behind one candidate is probably the feasible solution, according to all polls. We still don't know about the opposition's candidate, though. It's not clear. But hopefully the name will be clarified maybe in the coming weeks. And as soon as this happens, probably we will also make an episode of Talk Turkey on him, on or her. Who knows?
Well, yeah, good point. Maybe we're going to do another episode on Turkey elections in the upcoming weeks in Talk Turkey. I'm sure our viewers are really curious.
Well, we are looking forward to it. Take care till then.
Yes, see you in the next episode.